The human mind is like a cosmic interior, full of hidden landscapes, unconscious shadows, and enigmatic forces that influence our lives subtly. We look to other people for answers about life, emotions, and healing, and we spend a lot of time hoping they can provide us with that. On the other hand, what if we already possess the solution? One eternal truth was left to us by the great explorer of the unconscious, Carl Jung. If you don't put yourself first, you'll never get well. But to what extent is that accurate? Also, how do we even start to live it? The pressure to project an image of perfection as the model citizen, dependable friend, and hard-working employee begins the moment we are born. We are taught to conform, to help those around us, to blend in, and most importantly, to put others before ourselves. But we end up missing something crucial somewhere along the way. You can't give from a place of lack. Love yourself first, and then you will be able to love others. If your own life is in disarray, you will be unable to help others find calm. It is not possible for you to direct anybody else if you have no idea who you are just yet. Jung spent his life researching the human mind and came to the conclusion that everyone has a shadow side populated by unconscious archetypes, instincts, and long-forgotten emotions that influence their decision-making. The idea of the shadow was one of his most influential discoveries. Those aspects of ourselves that we choose to keep hidden, repress, or ignore. We reject these parts for what reason? Some emotions are taboo. For example, we were told that wrath is harmful, sadness is a sign of weakness, and anger is bad. Ought to stay away from. While it's helpful to take a day off, exercise, and eat better, putting yourself first in your healing journey requires something much more profound, a radical return to your own truth. This includes facing your inner world fearlessly, without masks, and without seeking approval from others. It's the opposite of what you might think. Resisting what you know will only make things worse. This work isn't easy. We live in a world that constantly bombards us with noise, notifications, comparisons, societal expectations, and the relentless demands to become someone we're not. It's a courageous act to face your shadow, to look into your wounds, fears, and discomforts that you've tried to avoid. And here lies the sacred paradox. When you dare to see yourself clearly without filters, judgment, and running, you finally begin to heal. Trying to fit in, to be accepted, causes us to disconnect from ourselves. And when we do try to turn inward, we don't always find peace. We're often confronted with a terrifying silence, an emptiness so vast that we'd rather avoid it altogether. But here's the paradox. That emptiness is not your enemy. It's the sacred space where your true self begins to awaken. Prioritizing yourself for healing does not mean ignoring others or becoming cold or indifferent. Rather, it means something far more courageous. It involves facing fears, and facing our fears head on. What this means is that you have to stop looking for someone else to save you and start taking charge of your own healing. It means learning to listen to your feelings as well as your thoughts without feeling guilty. It means allowing yourself to feel, rest, and say no without shame. It means setting boundaries without fear and gradually daring to be yourself without having to apologize. Jung taught that becoming your whole authentic self or individuation is not an easy or quick process. Fast. It's a gradual process of self-transformation that requires us to go through uncertainty, suffering, and inner turmoil. But it's also the only way to reach genuine inner completeness. Because when you stop hiding your shadow and start embracing yourself completely, you find something amazing. Healing isn't about erasing your pain, but about integrating it. And in that sacred act of embracing yourself completely without reservation, you discover something more precious than the world approval. The peaceful, liberating joy of being one's true self. Beneath rationality and beyond surface thoughts, in the unconscious is a symbolic world of images, instincts, and patterns that shape our lives. Jung recognized that genuine healing isn't about outward changes or forced positivity. Rather, it is a journey into the depths of our being, a rediscovery of the broken parts of our identity that we once rejected. This is more than a theoretical concept. It is a practical application of the principles of psychology, a painful and intense process that compels us to confront our inner critics who say, "You're not good enough." We must also face our deepest wounds, the scars from our childhood that have been covered up by conditioning, unresolved trauma, and the expectations of others. No one should love you. The only way to break the spell of these voices and find healing is to listen to them instead of resisting. However, even with this approach, freedom remains elusive. Music, and here is where Jung's profound. Archetypes, the eternal blueprint of the soul, are one of his most significant psychological contributions. They are not merely concepts, but active forces, primordial images that have accompanied humanity from the beginning of time. You can perceive them murmuring through myths, resonating in ancient tales revealed in dreams. They communicate through symbols, metaphors, and unexpected bursts of intuition, guiding us toward purpose. Even though we don't always understand their language, one of the most powerful archetypes is the hero. The hero represents the human desire to grow and transcend, but no hero ever starts as a rescuer. Instead, every hero must venture into the depths of their own soul, where they'll encounter dragons of fear, walk through darkness, and face their own shadow. In reality, this means something incredibly uncomfortable yet surprisingly simple. We can't heal by escaping our pain, and we can't outrun our own shadows. Rather, we must face them head-on. In order to overcome it, we must first walk through it, feel it, and understand it. However, many people resist this inner descent, opting instead for the familiar despite its pain, remaining in toxic relationships, enduring soul-crushing jobs, and clinging to habits that sap our vitality. This is not because these things bring peace, but rather because change is terrifying. As Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. True healing starts when you stop blaming the world for your suffering and start turning inward with courage. Ask yourself what patterns keep repeating, what wounds am I pretending not to see, and what emotions am I carrying alive? If you don't prioritize yourself, these conflicts will manifest through destructive relationship patterns, chronic illness, existential anxiety, or a knowing emptiness that never leaves. Life isn't a straight line. Some days you'll feel strong, and other days you'll feel like you've fallen backward. But Jung teaches us that nothing is wasted. Every detour, breakdown, and dark night has meaning in your unfolding. Even suffering, particularly suffering, contains the seeds of transformation. The unconscious shows itself through pain, not to punish you, but to awaken you. The wounds you dare to feel become the portals through which your true self returns. So many people spend their lives looking for answers in books, gurus, religions, and ideologies. While these can be helpful, the only truth that can truly set us free is the one we find within. What Carl Jung called individuation is the sacred journey of becoming one's most authentic, complete, and undivided self. But on this path, we must remove our masks, let go of our shame, and cease shaping ourselves to meet other people's expectations. It requires truthfulness, inner bravery, and a readiness to live without apologizing are essential, but they aren't free. When you put your inner truth ahead of external approval, you run the risk of being misunderstood, rejected, or even alone. But being alone isn't a punishment. It's the cost of being authentic. What you gain from being alone is invaluable. A strong bond with your authentic self, a life built on honesty and integrity, and the ability to face adversity head-on. Freedom that no one can take away. The unconscious is not a barren wasteland, but rather a vast inner ocean teeming with long-lost messages, shattered pieces of our soul, and ancient wisdom yearning to be rediscovered. Jung provided us with a map, but the journey is entirely up to us. To follow it, we must make self-prioritization, introspection, and humility our guiding principles. Our emotions are not at random, but rather echoes of our past, some of which are obvious and others so deeply buried that we fail to recognize them. These influences are still having an impact on us, but they change everything. They influence our thoughts, our relationships, and our reactions to the world around us. Jung recognized that humans are more than just rational beings. We are conduits for energies that shape our destiny subtly, even when we believe we have control. Jung's most significant finding was the idea of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects that exist in every person's soul, regardless of their gender. These are not external characteristics, but rather. In order to heal emotionally, we need to become aware of our deep inner polarities and learn to integrate them, rather than suppress them. When we decide to stop looking outside ourselves for wholeness and start exploring the vast symbolic terrain within, where the forgotten parts of ourselves are waiting to be revealed, we can begin to integrate these forces which impact our relationships, creativity, love, and sense of wholeness. Music, the feminine aspect within, or the anima. The masculine aspect of a woman's unconscious, animus, manifests as reason, structure, and decisive action. When these energies become imbalanced, we experience inner suffering and also start to project that chaos onto our outer lives. For example, a man whose hisma has been suppressed would exhibit a lack of emotional intelligence, connection, and intuitive understanding of the world. Emotional healing necessitates integration, a deliberate union of action and reflection, feeling and thought, doing and being. However, this integration is not something we can accomplish on our own. On one hand, we have the logical thinker who is emotionally distant and unable to express vulnerability. On the other hand, we have the woman who is overwhelmed by an unbalanced animus and lives in mental overdrive, constantly thinking and overanalyzing. She pushes through life without pausing, disconnected from her inner knowing, all at once. Jung taught that our healing is molded not only by our own efforts, but also by the symbols, stories, and myths that reside within us. These myths are more than just old stories passed down through generations. They are living psychological blueprints that shape our love, suffering, dreams, and choices. Every one of us is unknowingly acting out a personal myth. Some of us play the role of the savior, thinking we must rescue others no matter the cost. Others are ensnared in the myth of the martyr, who thinks that suffering is necessary to earn love. Many people stay in the prisoner's narrative, thinking that outside forces are constant barriers to their freedom. But here is where it all changes. The power to rewrite our own story comes when we recognize the myth we're unconsciously acting out. We are no longer passive characters in a script written by pain. We become authors of our own story. Jung believed that the unconscious is more than just a storehouse of wounds. It's also a source of untapped potential. A creative force that longs to be unleashed. Unfortunately, this power is frequently obstructed by the beliefs we internalized as children. Things like, I'm not good enough, love hurts always, and life is just a struggle for survival are examples of these ingrained beliefs. Over time, these thoughts become invisible cages, molding our actions and expectations without our knowledge. Until we muster the courage to question them, they define us. The first step toward genuine emotional healing is not to avoid these inherited beliefs, but to identify them, face them head-on, and bravely make courageous choices. Music. This leads us to an important truth, the sacred power of introspection. In today's fast-paced world, where distraction is the norm, our minds are constantly racing to keep up with the next social media post, work deadline, or task. These distractions are designed to keep us busy on the outside and disconnected on the inside. Being still is almost revolutionary in this age of constant stimulation, but real healing happens when we stop and reflect. Solitude. In the recesses of the mind where we risk being alone with our ideas without filters, distractions, or pretense. Jung had a deep understanding of this through his method of active imagination, which he used to connect the conscious and unconscious minds. Instead of repressing the thoughts and feelings that surfaced, he welcomed them, letting them manifest as inner figures, images, sensations, and even voices. He refrained from passing judgment on them and avoiding them altogether. Engaging in dialogue, listening, and watching, he came to the realization that beneath every emotion, even the most painful, lies a hidden truth and a message that needs to be heard. When we decide to put ourselves first, we open ourselves up to returning to this inner landscape, and we begin to see how much of our lives has been controlled by invisible forces, inherited fears, social expectations, and unconscious programming. We begin to realize that many of the decisions we believed were our own were actually influenced by these factors, influenced by the opinions of others, even when we don't question them. However, when we decide to take back control of our story and stop letting our past hurts, wounds, or the opinions of others determine our future selves, everything changes. When we start living from our inner truth, relationships may come and go, not because we failed, but because they don't align with our evolution. On the other hand, some connections will grow stronger, not based on need, but on mutual respect. It's not enough to simply wish for emotional healing. It must become a living commitment. Because ultimately, no one will come to save us. There are no saviors. No external answer can fill the internal void. The only one who can walk this path is you. Doors that once felt locked begin to open once we stop standing in our own way. However, this can only happen when we muster the courage to put ourselves first, not out of selfishness, but out of sacred responsibility. Embarking on the path of self-care that leads to emotional healing is no picnic. It's not just about taking a vacation or treating yourself to temporary gratification. It's a radical commitment to personal truth, a promise to honor your innermost needs, even when they go against everything you've been taught to suppress. Jung knew that the road to emotional healing is winding and not flat. This journey is filled with countless inner deaths and rebirths, each one revealing a new layer of who we are and leading us to the depths of our soul. One of the biggest challenges we may face is fear. We fear change, the unknown, and what we might find when we tune out the world around us. Humans have evolved to fear our own shadow, as if the parts of ourselves that we've buried are monsters that need to be slain. However, as Jung pointed out, the part of ourselves that we choose to ignore stays. Rather than going away, it becomes stronger. When we don't look at it, our shadow takes control and influences our actions, reactions, and relationships without us even realizing it. The shadow is more than just the shadow side of ourselves. It's the storehouse of all the things we've stifled to fit in, be accepted, or avoid pain. It contains our latent anger, unspoken desires, buried talents, and passions that we never dared to express. Here we discover the aspects of ourselves that were silenced, parts that long to be acknowledged, not belittled. The path to healing does not start with eradicating these pieces, but with embracing them, listening to their stories, and learning from them. This brings us to Jung's idea of the self. The self is not the ego, not the image we project to the outside world, nor the sum of our daily roles. Rather, it is something much more profound. It encompasses our entire psychic being, the sacred intersection of our conscious and unconscious minds, where all that which we are, have been, and have the potential to become comes together in this state of wholeness. To get there, we have to go through what Jung called the confrontation with the shadow. It's not an easy stage. It makes us sit with our fears and insecurities that we'd rather ignore, and we have to face the uncomfortable truths that we'd rather ignore. However, paradoxically, this confrontation also shows us something extraordinary, our true power, because it's within our wounds that we've attempted to hide our vulnerabilities. Our true selves emerge when we bravely embrace all aspects of ourselves, including our shadow sides, because it is only then that we can truly live free. Music, despite this, the majority of people try to avoid facing this inner struggle. They cling to what is familiar, even though it brings them suffering, because it is familiar and safe. They cling to an identity that has been shaped by their wounds, trauma, and limitations, even though it has become a prison. They mistake their pain for their personality, and they refuse to let go of the shackles. The transformation becomes an existential threat when it becomes so intertwined with their pain. However, Jung recognized a deep truth. True healing does not occur when suffering is erased, but when it is transformed, understood, allowed to speak, and used as the raw material for our evolution. Emotional pain, in this perspective, is not an enemy to be quelled, but a sacred messenger requesting to be heard. It indicates where love is needed, and it reveals the parts of ourselves that we have neglected. This leads us to the essential. We can't change what we don't see, and we can't heal what we deny. The first step in healing is being aware of the problem. We need to be brave enough to face ourselves without filters, justifications, or the masks we've worn for survival. This means questioning our deepest beliefs and values. How we begin to stop being prisoners of old wounds and start prioritizing ourselves. There is no one-size-fits-all formula, but every soul walks a unique path. Awareness is the first universal beginning. It's about questioning our beliefs and the stories we've inherited about our limits and potential. It's about listening to the still small voice inside, instead of seeking validation from others. When you put yourself first, you stop sacrificing your truth for the approval of others. You stop putting off enjoying life because you're afraid someone will judge you. And when you do that, you start to see things that were previously invisible. Your internal dialogue, your emotional expression, and the extent to which you've allowed yourself to be manipulated. You begin to understand that a lot of your feelings and thoughts aren't really yours. They're reverberations of past hurts and unconscious habits that have been passed down through generations. This leads you to one of Jung's most profound insights, the concept of the collective unconscious. We aren't individual entities, but rather interwoven threads in a web of shared psychic energy, ancestral memories, and cultural conditioning. Much of what we carry around with us isn't actually ours, but rather the residue of our ancestors, society, and culture. Healing, then, is more than just an individual act. It's a sacred sacrifice for the greater good. When you let go of a habit, a belief, or a traumatic experience, you set a precedent for a new way of being, and not only for yourself, but for others as well. This is the true power of putting yourself first. It's not selfishness or emotional detachment, but the most selfless act you can do. The world needs you to be balanced on the inside before it can be balanced on the outside. When you've healed your own wounds, you can't project them onto other people. When you've turned your suffering into wisdom, you can stop telling the same stories of suffering and start writing new ones. Music, but there's still fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of what might happen when we live true to ourselves. But Jung made it clear, fear is not a sign of weakness. When we feel fear rising, it's not a sign that we're doing something wrong. It means we're getting closer to something real. It means we're creeping closer to the truth within us that has been buried for a long time by habit, expectation, or survival. And healing starts the moment we decide to let go of the mental prison we've been living in and step into the unknown landscape of possibility. Introspection is the key. It's not about being afraid, judgmental, or justifying ourselves. It's about being present. Because healing isn't a destination or a one-time occurrence. It's a sacred process that continues throughout our lives, where we make the conscious decision to be more awake, authentic, and whole. As we embark on this journey, the question naturally arises, what aspects of ourselves have we let slip along the way? Jung described individuation as a process of shedding, the slow removal of layers, imposed by others so that we might rediscover our true selves. This journey is seldom smooth. We learn early on to conform, to shrink, to contort, and to perform for approval. When we do this, we give up some parts of our soul in exchange for belonging. Some of us give up our sense of awe, our playful curiosity, our ability to make mistakes without feeling bad about it. Others give up on their wildest dreams, burying them so they can get love, safety, or recognition. But here is the truth. Because of this, even people who seem to have it all, accomplishments, relationships, a place in the world, may actually be hiding a quiet emptiness on the inside. This ache is not a sign of weakness or failure, but rather the voice of the essential self, the part that has been lost and forgotten. It sinks into the unconscious like forgotten treasures buried beneath the surface, waiting to be remembered or called back home. That which was once drowned out is now being heard. And as we start to listen, we start to reconnect not only with our past, but also with our future selves. Music, emotional healing isn't just about getting over past hurts. It's a sacred retrieval. It's a journey back to what made us feel alive, to the essence that nourished our souls, but which we let die when the world told us what was right. It's about remembering what sparked our spirit before logic and duty extinguished it. It's about honoring our past selves while embracing our future selves. Returning to our true selves entails reawakening dormant passions, dormant desires, and dreams that were exchanged for conformity. This return to our true selves is not an easy or passive process. Rather, it demands intentional introspection and the truthful examination of our emotions, scars, and desires. Ultimately, it demands the bravery to confront the unsettling reality that we are, in many ways, our own captors. We have convinced ourselves of stories that explain our lack of joy, our stagnation, and our habitual patterns of behavior. In the same painful patterns, Jung understood that the unconscious is not an enemy, but a powerful ally, but only if we are willing to listen. The unconscious speaks to us through symbols and dreams, repetitive emotional patterns, and visceral reactions that appear out of nowhere. If we keep getting into dysfunctional relationships, conflict cycles, or a restless search for meaning, it is not a coincidence. These are not random misfortunes, but messages. The unconscious is trying to get our attention, but we tend to ignore it in favor of noise, work, screens, and obligations. It's not that we're too busy, it's just that feeling is scary. But what we avoid doesn't go away. It builds up, gets worse, and eventually presents itself as anxiety, depression, chronic dissatisfaction that neither success nor approval can fix, a sudden crisis, or an inexplicable feeling of being lost. And in the midst of all this, we often fail to listen to the unconscious voice. In those moments, we are faced with a choice: keep running away or finally turn inward. If you want to heal, you have to prioritize yourself. That means letting yourself feel without shame, being honest about your wounds, and asking the hard questions. What do I want? What makes me happy? What's been hurting inside? It's not an easy journey, but it's a transformative one. As we reconnect with ourselves, we start to heal, realizing that our choices are often driven by fear rather than love, that we betray ourselves to avoid disappointing others, and that our life may be a reflection of that rather than our true self, brings us to a crucial realization: responsibility. Healing does not involve blaming others for our wounds, but rather owning up to what we do with them. We can't change the past, but we can choose how it shapes us. We can either let our pain weigh us down or use it to propel us forward. True healing does not erase pain, but gives it new meaning. Rather than asking why this happened to me, it asks, what am I meant to learn from this? When we ask this, everything shifts. We stop seeing ourselves as victims of life and start seeing ourselves as authors of it. We find that we are not defined by our pain, but by how we rise from it. This is the inner alchemy that Jung often spoke about. We regain our power in that moment. However, this isn't a one-and-done moment. It's an ongoing commitment, a journey of self-awareness, truth, and inner alignment. We'll have days of doubt, days of wanting to go back to the old ways, days when fear tells us to stay small. But every time we choose to be true to ourselves, to act from authenticity rather than habit, we get closer to our true selves. That is healing. It's not a destination, but a lifelong journey. It's a process of reclaiming the pieces of ourselves that have been lost. Jung reminded us that transformation begins with inner truth, with the courage to stop seeking permission and to fully claim our value, and that this conditioning fractures us. We live in a culture that rewards overgiving, overworking, and overpleasing, and it measures our worth by how much we sacrifice. However, as we integrate what once felt broken, we move forward not from a place of lack but of wholeness. And with each step, we see that prioritizing ourselves is not selfish, but a sacred responsibility. You are affirming your right to live authentically, freely, and fully when you choose to put an end to what drains you and put an end to what nourishes you. Along this path, you will learn to set boundaries without guilt, to say no without explanation, and to walk away from toxic relationships. Some days you will feel like you're making progress, but other days you will feel like you're going backwards. What matters is not perfection, but persistence. The most beautiful part is that when you heal yourself, you heal the world around you. You become a living example of what it means to love from fullness, to speak from truth, to move from consciousness. And in doing so, you give others silent support. What hurts you is not cruelty, but clarity. You learn to trust your inner voice, to stop outsourcing your truth, and to remember that everything you seek is already within. Emotional healing is a way of life, a commitment to becoming who you truly are. The decision to prioritize oneself, to listen deeply, and to create space for healing is the first step toward a life of freedom, truth, and soulfulness. If anything within this message stirred you, if even a single word mirrored your inner, then it is permission to do the same. Because in the end, the greatest revolution is the one that happens within. Have you found a soul whose presence feels like home? Or are you still on the sacred path back to yourself? Your story, no matter how unfinished, has the potential to illuminate someone else's darkness and provide them with the sign they were seeking. And if someone you care about is silently fighting the illusion that love must hurt, that self-abandonment is the price of connection, or that they are unworthy of peace, please share this video with them. You never know when they might need a helping hand. Allow me to connect with those who are in need of a reminder that genuine love does not require us to shrink. True connection does not require us to sacrifice our souls. And the most important union we can ever form is with our own inner truth. Before you leave, I encourage you to subscribe and turn on notifications. In this space, we delve into the depths of the mind, uncovering its hidden architecture, the unconscious's murmurs, and how each relationship reflects our personal growth. If you have any thoughts, questions, or experiences that you would like us to address in future videos, please share them below. Your presence here is vital, and we appreciate you taking the time to share them. Thank you for coming to this video and for working on yourself, for remembering your true self. And keep in mind that when the right person comes along, you will know it, not with fear, but with peace. In the meanwhile, focus on cultivating your inner relationship, as that is the most intimate relationship there is. Home is the foundation, and all things real originate from that completeness. Until we meet again, I will see you on the road.